Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Aqilah Anisa Riadi. My student ID number 2320076. In this video, I will talk about the material is about grammatical equivalence. Grammatical equivalence refers to the diversity of aspect categories across language. In simple language, the application of grammatical equivalence is complex, which has the same meaning but the model is different in certain discussion. The structures are different across language. It is why the translator encounters difficulty in finding the direct equivalent in target language. This lack of grammatical categories often results in some change in the information in the target language, adding or omitting information. First, grammatical versus lexical category. Grammar is organized along two main dimensions, morphology and syntax. Morphology is covered the structure of words, the way in which the form of a word changes to indicate specific contrast in the grammatical system. For example, most nouns in English have two forms, namely the singular and the plural. Singular is the example man, child, and car. Meanwhile, plural, the example man, children, and cars. The morphological structure of a language determines the basic information which must be expressed in the language. Syntax. Syntax is covered the grammatical structure of groups, clause, and sentence. The linear sequence of classes of words such as nouns, verb, adverb, and adjective, and functional elements such as subject, predicator, and object, which are allowed in a given language. The structure of a language imposes certain restrictions on the way message may be organized in that language. Choice in language can be expressed grammatically or lexically, depending on the type and range of linguistic resource available in given language. Choice made from clause system, such as the number system, singular or plural, or the pronoun system in English, are grammatical. Those made from open-end sets of items or expressions are lexical. Grammatical choices are normally expressed morphologically, as in the case of the singular or plural contrast in English. They may also be expressed syntactically, for instance by manipulating the order of elements in a clause to indicate certain relations between the elements for the function of the clause. The difference between the order of elements in a statement and the question in English. The example, she had forgotten about the party, or had she forgotten about the party? Second, the diversity of grammatical categories across language. Languages are differently equipped to express different real-world relations, and they certainly do not express all aspects of meaning with equivalence. This is true in theory, but in practice, the lack of a grammatical device can make the translation of the interconceptual information very difficult indeed. First, the lack of a grammatical category in a given language suggests that the indication of information associated with that category is regarded as optional. The frequency of occurrence of such optional information tends to be low, and a translation which repeatedly indicates information that are normally left unspecific in the target language is bound to sound unnatural. Second, because such information will have to be expressed lexically, it is likely to assume more importance in the target text than it does in the source text. The fact that lexical choices are optional gives them more weight than grammatical choice. A brief discussion of some major categories with example is intended to illustrate the kinds of difficulty that translators often encounter because of difference on the grammatical structure of source and target language. 1. Number. Not a language has grammatical category of number. It is why the translator often face difficult and makes some adjustment by changing the information. The strategy used by the translator depends on the grammatical rules in the target language. The common problem arises when a translation working from a language which has number distinctions into a language with no category of number. The following are some examples of strategies used: omitting the relevant information on number and encoding this information lexically. 2. Gender. The common strategy used to overcome the problem caused by gender in translation is making the necessary adjustment, for instance by adding the gender dimension in the target text. 3. Person. The category of person relates to the nations of participants' roles. In course language, participant roles are systematically divided through a closed system of pronouns which might be organized along a variety of dimensions. The most common distinctions is that between first person, are identifying the speaker or a group which includes the speaker, English I or we. And third person is identifying persons and things other than the speaker and address, English be or she or it or they. In addition to the main distinction based on participant roles, the person system may be organized along a variety of other dimensions. 4. Tense and aspect. Tense and aspect are grammatical categories in a large number of languages. The form of the verbs on language which have those categories usually indicates two main types of information-time relation and aspectual difference. Have to do with locating on even a time. The usual distinction is between past, present, and future. Aspectual difference have to do with the temporal distribution of an event, for instance, its completion or non-completion, continuations or momentariness. In some language, the tense and aspect system of parts of it may be highly developed with several fine distinctions in temporal location or distribution. 5. Voice. A voice relates with use of active and passive voice. Language which have a category of voice do not always use the passive with the same frequency and occasionally have different meaning and function. To solve the problem posed by grammatical categories of voice, the translator usually render a passive structure by an active structure or conversely an active structure by passive structure in order to avoid negative conjugation. Active the example, Nike element cell open and the man cell hall in 1986. And passive the example, the men's cell hall was opened in 1986. Third, a brief note on word order. The syntactic structure of a language impose restrictions on the way message may be organized in that language. The order in which functional elements such as subject, predicator, and object may occur is more fixed in some languages than in others. Languages vary in the extent to which they rely on word order to signal the relationship elements in the clause. Some languages have case inflection which indicate the relationship between the elements in the clause. For instance, who do, what to whom, In such language, the form of a noun changes depending on its function in the clause. The meaning of a sentence in English and in language with similarly fixed word order such as Chinese often depends entirely on the order in which the elements are placed. The example, the man ate the fish and the fish ate the man. Fourth, introducing text. Following Brown and Yule, text is defined as the verbal recall of a communicated event. It is an instance of language in use rather than language as an abstract system or meanings and relation. 1. Text versus non-text. A good translator does not begin to translate until or he has read the text at least once and got a gist of the overall message. Once the source text is understood, the translator then has to tackle the task of producing a target version, which can be kept as a text in one's own right. The nearest we get the non-text in actual life, leaving aside the works of those poets and prose writers who deliberately set out to create non-text, is probably in the speech of young children and in bad translation. 2. Features of text organization. Connection within and among in sentence. The connections are of several kinds. The first, there are connections which are established through the arrangements of information within each clause and the way this relates to the arrangement of information on preceding and following clause and sentence. These contribute mainly to topic development and maintain strong thematic and information structure. Second, there are sub-based connections which establish interrelationship between person and events. And finally, there are underlying semantic connections which allow use to make sense of a text as a unit of meaning. Another important feature of the organization derives from the overlapping nations of genre and text type, but relate to the way in which textual material is packaged by the writing alone patterns familiar to the reader. Texts have been classified into many ways to capture this type of packaging. The first and more straightforward classification is based on the context in which texts occur and result. Maybe that's all about the material is grammatical equivalence. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Just tell me what you're waiting for. Baby, I've been waiting for. You wanna style, I'm faded. Babe, I'm drunk and wasted.